So we wanted to come back and continue our video on the Eighth Amendment. Now, in the first part we covered bail. In the second part we're going to cover excessive fines and cruel and unusual punishment, because all too often they fall into the same umbrella. So there have been a lot of issues with excessive fines over the last few years in our justice system. A fine is defined as a sum of money you have to pay once a judge looks at your case and decides that you did something wrong, i.e. due process. Now, we know that during the Obama administration, the IRS was used to target conservatives for voting for the bad guy. So right there we see already there's an infringement there. Our rights were infringed on by our federal government. Well, not really by our federal government, because the IRS isn't a branch of the federal government. The IRS is a private company. So that infringement is even worse because our federal government allowed, in fact, directed that infringement by a private company that none of us should have to give money to because taxation is theft. Anyway, moving on. There's a lot of examples I could give that fall under cruel and unusual punishment. But the one that speaks to me the most is a law that's applied in almost every state called the Safe Streets Law of 1995. What it says is, if you're stopped and you are driving your vehicle without a license, your car may be towed and impounded for 30 days. Now, the wording of the law is that it's supposed to give you time to resolve the issues and make sure that you're legal before they put you back on the road. Okay. On face value, that sounds okay. But here's the problem with it. On average, impound fees average from $150 a day to $350 a day, depending on the impound yard. So you take a person who, for whatever reason, lost their license. Okay, some people lose their license for good reason. Drinking and driving, breaking laws excessively. Okay, fine. There should be punishments for doing things that are wrong. That's okay. But where it becomes cruel and unusual is this. The average American right now is making around $10 an hour. So if you look at $10 an hour, we'll be generous and say 40 hours a week. Most people are making between 20 and 30 hours a week because companies don't want to have to pay insurance for their employees. So you got that generous number of 40 hours a week. That means you're making about $750 a month after taxes. So $750 a month after taxes. Now, if you take the lowest possible cost of impound at $150 a day for 30 days, you're looking at right around $4,500. For the average person making $750 a month, that is 6 months of wages. Now, you might say to yourself, a car isn't a big deal. When you're trying to support your family, yes, a car is. And throwing out the bullshit argument that a bus is there, here's the thing. Previously to living here, we lived in Pennsylvania. The buses in our town stopped running at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So I could take a bus to work every day, but I had to walk home. I worked in Pittston, Pennsylvania, and I lived in Glen Lyon, Pennsylvania. That's a 28-mile walk. I had to walk every night. I got home about 1 o'clock in the morning most days. Pennsylvania weather is not kind. It snowed most days. Rained the days it wasn't snowing. Ice was prevalent. Walking down a major highway, most of that was a nightmare. I can personally tell you that not having a car directly affects a person. And it is cruel and unusual to put a person in that position over something as stupid as a parking ticket, or whether or not some ex decided he didn't pay enough child support or she didn't pay enough child support. Because yeah, you can lose your license for that. That is by definition cruel and unusual. So, we can see it's excessive and it's cruel and unusual. Like I said in the beginning of this process, any infringement is wrong. Any infringement is an indication that we have a serious problem. That is a clear infringement on our rights as a nation. It specifically targets the impoverished and seeks to create a further impoverished class by keeping people out of the workforce and unable to support themselves. And you can argue that, well, fine, get a job that falls in the hours of the buses. Okay, yeah, that's not a bad idea. Until you consider the fact that how many people are competing for those jobs that fall within those bus schedule hours. But we'll move on here and talk about our next issue, our prison system. Now, I believe that bad people should be punished. I do. And I'm not one to preach this prison industrial complex bullshit. But our prison system is desperately broken. How do you expect to fix our nation's problems by taking offenders and rather than rehabilitating them, putting them in a place where, A, you have people who have spent years learning how to be better criminals and running better criminal enterprises in the system than they ever did outside the system. People go into prison and learn to be better criminals. Your lifelong offenders are teaching your low-level offenders to come out and be better offenders. Okay? Then you add to that, you're taking people who already have demonstrated an inability to make good decisions. Usually because of unchecked mental illness or drug addiction. You're putting in a place where drugs are everywhere. Where they're constantly exposed to an environment of fear and intimidation because of the fear of being assaulted or sexually accosted and assaulted. You have it's like a training camp for monsters, and we wonder why people come out of our prisons and roll right back in, because we're not rehabilitating them. We're just using them to keep that system going and keep it funded. That's how it works. A prison gets funding based on how many people that are there. And frankly, after the Jeffrey Epstein disaster, we have to look at our Bureau of Prisons because there's some serious questions that have to be answered there. Why do we have so many prisoners and such a massive amount being poured into our prison system of money, yet guards aren't being paid properly? We don't have enough guards working in the jails. The people who are there to try to promote rehabilitation don't have the means or the revenue to do so. There's some serious issues with our prison system. Some serious issues. And I'm sorry, that's cruel and unusual. No matter what you think of these people who have broken the law, the purpose of putting them in jail is not wholly to punish them. Ideally, we want to rehabilitate them and show them that their behaviors are problematic and they can be better people in our society. I apologize. I'm just getting over pharyngitis. That being said, Let's look at the next level problem, and that's our death penalty. I'm going to say there have been some real serious issues with our death penalty, and it's been mostly in our so-called Enlightened Age, 1930 till now. I'm going to give you 3 examples where our current methods of execution have been applied, and there have been serious failures. And these are only 3 examples. There are dozens of examples out there. But what I hope to demonstrate with these examples is that there is a problem with the system, and that our death penalty has become cruel and unusual. I believe in the death penalty. I wholeheartedly do. I lost my mother and my brother to murder. I'd strap the son of a bitch that did him in, and I'd do it myself. I believe in the death penalty. But I believe as a society we have to be better than the people we're executing. If they got to be removed from society, so be it. But we need to do it humanely, and we need to be better than they were. So my first example is from 1983 here in Alabama. John Evans. He was a robber and a murderer. Convicted, he deserved to be executed. He was executed in the electric chair. The issue was it took 3 jolts to kill him. His body caught fire and smoke literally filled the room. It was seeping into the gallery where people were becoming nauseous and vomiting and all kinds of badness. It happened because the people operating the chair used a dry synthetic sponge. No way that should have happened. Our next example is also from 1983, James Lee Gray. He was a child rapist and a murderer. Again, he deserved to die. He was executed in the gas chamber. Due to user error, it took 8 minutes for him to die. As he died, he convulsed and beat his head against a post and moaned. It was found after his execution that he had actually crushed part of his skull, slamming it into the post. Our third example is Randy Wolz. He robbed a woman at a theater, murdered her, and set her body on fire. He deserved to die. At his execution by lethal injection, the staff was so inept that Walls had to help them find a vein and assist in his own execution. He inserted the catheter himself. I can't fathom putting a gun in a man's hand and forcing him to shoot himself in the head. And that's essentially what we did there. All of those men deserve to die. But I feel like we as a society have to be better than they were. Period. No exceptions. That's how it has to be. Now, when we look at execution statistically in our country, since the organized founding of the Bureau of Prisons, we have had 2,721 hangings. This doesn't count for vigilante hangings or posses or lynch mobs or anything like that. This is legally recorded hangings by U.S. Marshals on up through the legitimate justice system, or as legitimate as because it could be in the Old West. 85 of those were botched. They resulted in decapitation. The person was hung wrong, and they suffocated to death rather than their neck breaking, which means there's a 3.12% margin of failure. Electrocutions, we've had 4,375. A total of 84 of those have been botched, for a total of 1.92% failure rate. We've had 593 executions by gas. with 32 of those being botched, for a total of 5.4% failure rate. We've had 1,054 lethal injections. 75 of those were botched, for a total of 7.12% failure. And our fourth method, which we still use in the U.S., it's not common, but it's still used, is firing squad. There have been 0 botches, and it is the most successful method of execution that we have. So when we look at it across the board, there have been a total of 8,776 executions in the United States, with 276 of those being botched. Now, you might say that's not a big number and it's not a big deal, but if that was your loved one, you would feel like it's a big deal. It comes out to a whopping 3.15% failure rate. As I said before, any infringement is a bad thing, and it points to a serious problem, a deficiency in our Constitution. If you have any questions, feel free to ask in the comment section. We're always here to help. As always, be decent to each other, folks, because we're all in this together. God bless.
Hey folks, thanks for watching today. As always, you can join the conversation at Prep Logic on Facebook and MeWe, and catch our podcast weekly at Anchor FM. As always, folks, be decent to each other, because we're all in this together. God bless.